The day began like any other in the small mountain village of Green Valley. The sun climbed over the high peaks, casting a warm golden light on the stone cottages and the green fields where sheep grazed peacefully. Children laughed on their way to school, and farmers tended to their crops, their familiar routines a comforting rhythm of life. No one suspected that the clear blue sky held a secret. It was a secret that would soon be revealed with a terrible and sudden violence. The air grew still and heavy, a strange quiet falling over the valley, as if the world itself was holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. By midday, the change was undeniable. The blue sky had vanished, replaced by a thick blanket of dark, angry clouds that seemed to touch the very tops of the mountains. They gathered with an unnatural speed, swirling and churning like a boiling pot. A low rumble echoed through the valley, not the sound of distant thunder, but something deeper, more menacing. The birds stopped singing, and the sheep huddled together, their nervous bleats the only sound in the eerie silence. The villagers looked up at the sky, a growing unease settling in their hearts. This was no ordinary mountain storm. It felt different, ancient, and powerful. Then, the sky broke open. It was not rain that fell, but a solid wall of water, a cloudburst of incredible force. The drops were huge and heavy, hammering down on the tin roofs with a deafening roar. It was as if the entire river in the sky had decided to empty itself directly onto their small village. The world outside the windows became a blur of gray water and wind. Gutters overflowed in seconds, and small streams turned into raging torrents. The sheer volume of water was overwhelming, a deluge that seemed determined to wash away everything in its path. It was a storm of a lifetime, and it had arrived without warning. The villagers were trapped in their homes, listening to the terrifying symphony of the storm. The noise was constant and overwhelming, a combination of the pounding rain, the howling wind, and the growing roar of the river in the valley below. The ground itself seemed to tremble under the assault. Lights flickered and then died, plunging the village into a deeper darkness, lit only by the occasional terrifying flash of lightning. Fear, cold and sharp, crept into every home. They were cut off, isolated, and at the mercy of the mountain's fury. The storm was not just passing over, it was attacking their peaceful home. The water rose with terrifying speed. The river, normally a gentle stream where children played, had become a monster. It was a churning brown beast, filled with logs, rocks, and the debris of a world being torn apart. It clawed at its banks, eating away the soft earth and pulling trees into its violent current. The sound was a constant, deafening roar that filled the air and vibrated through the ground, a reminder of the immense power that had been unleashed. The village was built on higher ground, but the river was rising higher than anyone had ever seen, threatening to swallow the lower fields and homes. The immense amount of rain did more than just swell the river. It saturated the steep hillsides that surrounded the village, turning solid earth into a thick, unstable mud. Soon, the dreaded sound of a landslide echoed from the slopes above. A great section of the mountain simply gave way, sliding down with a terrible grinding noise. It was a river of mud and rock, and it flowed with unstoppable force, burying a small barn and a section of the main road. The very foundations of the valley seemed to be shifting, making every shadow and every sound a source of fresh terror for the trapped villagers. The bridges were the first to go. The old wooden bridge at the east end of the village, a landmark for generations, groaned under the pressure of the floodwaters. With a final, sickening crack, its supports gave way, and it was torn from its foundations, its timbers tossed about in the current like matchsticks. The newer, stronger concrete bridge at the other end held on for a little longer, but the raging river was relentless. It undermined the bridge's footings until it too collapsed, its broken form disappearing into the brown water. Green Valley was now completely cut off from the outside world, an isolated island in a sea of destruction. For the animals of the valley, it was a time of pure terror. Pets were separated from their families in the chaos. Frightened dogs barked from porches as the water crept closer, and cats climbed to the highest points they could find, their eyes wide with fear. In the fields, livestock were in grave danger. Sheep were stranded on small patches of high ground, bleeding in panic, as the water swirled around them. Cows were trapped in flooded barns, their lowing calls filled with distress. Even the wild animals of the forest were caught, as their dens and burrows were flooded, forcing them into the open and into the path of the dangerous water. When the storm finally passed and a weak, watery sun broke through the clouds, the true extent of the damage was revealed. The village was a wreck, surrounded by a sea of mud and water. But amidst the despair, a new spirit began to grow. It was a spirit of determination. A small group of villagers gathered in the village square, their faces grim but their eyes filled with resolve. They were farmers, shopkeepers, and elders. They knew the land, and they knew its creatures. They could not stand by while animals suffered. This was their home, and they would fight to save every life they could, human or animal. The news of the disaster, though slow to travel from the isolated valley, eventually reached the nearby towns, and with the news came help. A veterinarian named Dr. Evans, a kind man with a gentle touch and years of experience, packed his medical supplies into his sturdy jeep. He had treated many of the pets and livestock in Green Valley before, and felt a deep connection to the community. He was joined by volunteers from an animal welfare society, a group of dedicated animal lovers who brought cages, ropes, and a deep passion for helping creatures in need. They were strangers to the village, but they shared a common purpose. The journey to Green Valley was difficult and dangerous. The main roads were blocked by landslides and floodwater, forcing the rescue team to find alternative routes. They drove their vehicles as far as they could, then continued on foot, carrying their heavy equipment over treacherous terrain. They had to cross swollen streams, navigate through thick mud, and climb over fallen trees. Every step was a challenge, a test of their commitment. But the thought of the scared and injured animals waiting for them pushed them onwards. They were a small army of compassion, marching towards a battlefield of mud and water. When the outside helpers finally arrived in the village, they were met with weary but grateful faces. The locals and the newcomers quickly formed a single, unified team. The farmers offered their knowledge of the local landscape, pointing out where animals were likely to be trapped. Dr. Evans set up a makeshift clinic in the village hall, preparing to treat the injured. The animal lovers organized the equipment and planned the rescue efforts. There were no leaders, only partners. Everyone had a role to play. Their shared mission created an instant bond, a powerful force of kindness, ready to face the chaos. The newly formed rescue team wasted no time. They split into smaller groups, each assigned to a different part of the ravaged valley. One group, led by a sturdy farmer named David, headed towards the lower fields where the livestock were trapped. They waded through knee-deep mud and cold, murky water. The scene was heartbreaking. Sheep were huddled on tiny islands of grass, their wool heavy and matted with mud. A few cows stood miserably in a flooded barn, the water up to their bellies. The team worked with a quiet efficiency, using ropes to guide the frightened animals towards safer, higher ground. Another group ventured towards the riverbank, a place of great danger. The current was still fast and powerful, and the ground was unstable. They were looking for pets that might have been washed downstream or trapped along the river's edge. They called out names, their voices carrying over the rush of the water. It was slow, painstaking work. After an hour of searching, a young volunteer spotted something caught in the branches of a fallen tree near the water. It was a small dog, shivering and terrified, but alive. Carefully, they made their way to the tree and brought the grateful animal back to safety. A third team, which included Dr. Evans, focused on the village itself. They went from house to house, checking on families and their pets. Many animals were found hiding under beds or in cupboards, still trembling with fear from the storm. Dr. Evans gently examined each one, treating minor cuts and calming their frayed nerves. He found a cat with a broken leg, its owner weeping with relief as the vet carefully splinted the injury. These small acts of kindness were like candles being lit in the darkness, bringing comfort and hope to the distressed villagers and their beloved animal companions. The challenges were immense. The mud was like quicksand in some places, sucking at their boots and making every step an effort. The risk of further landslides was always present, a constant threat looming from the wet and unstable hillsides. The rescuers had to communicate with shouts and hand signals over the noise of the still gushing water. But they did not falter. Their shared purpose gave them strength. Each successful rescue, no matter how small, fueled their determination to continue. They were saving not just animals, but a part of the village's heart. As the day wore on, the rescue team heard about a family whose dog was missing. The family's small shed, located at the edge of their property, had been hit by a minor landslide. The shed had collapsed into a pile of broken wood, twisted metal, and mud. The dog, a gentle golden retriever named Daisy, had been inside. The family had called for her, but there was no response. They feared the worst. A small group of rescuers, including the farmer David and a young volunteer, made their way to the site, their hearts heavy with a sense of dread. The pile of debris looked dense and impassable. When they arrived, they noticed something strange. They saw Daisy. She was not trapped under the rubble, but was sitting beside it, her body covered in mud. She was digging frantically at the debris with her paws, whining softly. When the rescuers approached, she did not run to them for comfort. Instead, she barked once, a sharp, urgent sound, and then immediately went back to digging. It was clear she was trying to tell them something. She refused to leave the spot, her eyes fixed on the pile of broken wood. Her loyalty and distress were plain to see, a powerful, silent plea for help. The rescuers understood immediately. Daisy was not trying to save herself. She was trying to save someone else. They began to work carefully, pulling away pieces of the shattered shed. It was dangerous work. The pile was unstable, and any wrong move could cause it to collapse further. Daisy watched them, her body tense, her soft whines encouraging them to hurry. The team worked with a new sense of urgency, their hands moving quickly but gently. They called out, listening for any sound from beneath the wreckage, but heard only the sound of their own efforts and Daisy's anxious panting. After several long, tense minutes, a rescuer moved a large piece of a wooden wall and saw a small opening. From deep inside the darkness, they heard a faint, high-pitched squeak. Hope surged through the team. They worked faster now, their movements more confident. Soon, they had cleared enough space to look inside. There, huddled together in a small protected cavity under a fallen table, was a litter of tiny puppies. They were only a few days old, blind and helpless. Daisy had given birth just before the storm, and she had refused to abandon her babies, standing guard until help arrived. It was a moment of pure, unshakable love. The rescue of Daisy and her puppies was a moment of great joy, but it was quickly followed by a new worry. As the team carefully carried the puppies to the temporary clinic, they noticed the sky was changing again. The clouds on the horizon were growing darker, and the wind was picking up, carrying a familiar chill. Another storm was coming. The weather forecast, received on a crackling battery-powered radio, confirmed their fears. They had only a few hours before more rain would fall on the already saturated ground. This was a race against time. The news spread quickly through the rescue teams, creating a new sense of urgency. They had to speed up their efforts. Another storm would mean more flooding and a much higher risk of new landslides. Any animals still trapped would be in even greater danger. The teams worked with renewed speed and determination, their movements becoming more efficient. They did not have the luxury of being slow and methodical anymore. Every minute counted. The thought of another downpour pushed them to ignore their aching muscles and growing exhaustion. The safety of the remaining animals depended on their speed. The tension was high. Rescuers called out to each other across the muddy fields, their voices tight with urgency. "Have you checked the old Miller farm?" one would shout. "There's a report of a horse trapped near the creek." Another would call. They shared information quickly, making fast decisions about where to go next. The makeshift clinic was getting crowded as more animals were brought in. Dr. Evans and the volunteers worked tirelessly, treating injuries and providing warm blankets and food. The entire village seemed to be moving with a single, frantic purpose, united against the approaching threat. As the first drops of the new rain began to fall, a team made one last, desperate search in a flooded part of the woods. They found a young deer, its leg caught in a wire fence hidden beneath the murky water. It was weak and terrified. Working quickly in the fading light and the increasing rain, they managed to cut the wire and free the deer. They guided it towards higher, safer ground, watching as it bounded away into the forest. It felt like a final victory against the clock. They had done everything they could. Now, all they could do was head for shelter and hope that their efforts had been enough. The second storm was not as violent as the first, but it brought more rain and made the rescue work impossible for a time. The teams gathered in the village hall, tired and wet, but their spirits were not broken. They shared stories of the animals they had saved, and these stories became small miracles that lifted everyone's hearts. They talked about the frightened cat they had coaxed down from a high rooftop, using a gentle voice and a small bowl of milk. The cat's owner, an elderly woman who lived alone, had cried with joy, her beloved companion safe in her arms once more. They remembered the sight of the stranded sheep, now safe in a dry barn. The farmer, David, spoke of how the sheep, usually skittish animals, had seemed to understand that the rescuers were there to help. They had followed the ropes with little resistance, their trust a silent thank you. One of the volunteers shared the story of finding a family's lost rabbit, huddled in a small, dry space under the roots of a large tree. The children of the family had been so worried, and their happy smiles when their pet was returned were a reward greater than any words of thanks. Dr. Evans told them about the animals in his makeshift clinic. Daisy and her puppies were warm and safe, the mother dog now calm and content, licking her babies clean. The cat with the broken leg was resting comfortably, its pain eased. A dozen other animals, from dogs and cats to a bewildered chicken, were recovering from their ordeal. Each creature was a testament to the team's hard work. These were not just animals, they were survivors. They represented the resilience of life and the power of compassion in the face of disaster. These stories of hope were like sparks of light in the gloomy evening. They reminded everyone why they were there. The work was hard, dangerous, and emotionally draining, but these small victories made it all worthwhile. The community, brought together by the crisis, found strength in sharing these moments. The rescue mission was not just about saving lives. It was about reaffirming the bond between humans and animals. It was about finding hope in small acts of kindness and courage, and celebrating every single life that had been pulled back from the brink of disaster. After the storms passed and the floodwaters began to recede, the long and difficult task of healing began. The village of Green Valley was changed forever. The landscape was scarred by landslides, and the river now followed a slightly different course. But the spirit of the community had not been washed away. In fact, it had grown stronger. The shared experience of the disaster and the rescue mission had forged powerful bonds between neighbors and with the new friends who had come to help. They now faced the challenge of rebuilding not as individuals, but as a united family. The rescue team's work continued, but it changed in nature. The immediate danger was over, but many animals still needed care. Dr. Evans stayed for several more days, making sure all the injured animals were stable and on the road to recovery. The volunteers from the Animal Welfare Society helped to create temporary shelters for pets whose homes had been destroyed. They also organized food and supply donations, ensuring that every animal had what it needed. The locals worked alongside them, their gratitude evident in every action. They had saved the village's animals, and now they were helping to heal the village's heart. The story of Daisy and her puppies became a local legend, a symbol of hope and a mother's love. The family whose shed had been destroyed decided to name the puppies after the rescuers who had saved them. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to the team. It was a permanent reminder of the good that had come out of such a terrible event. The story was told and retold, a beacon of light that helped people to look forward to the future instead of dwelling on the pain of the past. It showed that even in the darkest of times, love and courage could create miracles. The recovery of the village was a slow process. It took weeks to clear the roads and months to repair the damaged homes. But through it all, the community worked together. People shared what little they had, offered a helping hand without being asked, and provided emotional support to those who were struggling. The animal rescue mission had set a powerful example. It had shown them that by working together with kindness and determination, they could overcome any challenge. The animals, now safe and sound, were a constant, living reminder of their collective strength and resilience. Weeks turned into months, and the seasons began to change. The scars on the landscape started to heal. New grass grew on the hillsides, and wildflowers bloomed in the fields. The river returned to its gentle, peaceful flow. The village of Green Valley was slowly but surely coming back to life. The physical signs of the flood were fading, but the memory of the community's response remained strong and clear. The disaster had tested them, but they had emerged from it with a deeper appreciation for their home and for each other. A new sense of peace settled over the valley. The animals of the village thrived. Daisy's puppies grew into strong, playful young dogs, a constant source of joy for the entire community. The cat with the broken leg made a full recovery, once again chasing sunbeams in its owner's cottage. The farmers reported that their livestock were calm and healthy. The bonds between the villagers and their animal companions had been strengthened by the shared ordeal. They were more than just pets or livestock. They were fellow survivors, a cherished part of the resilient community. Their presence was a daily reminder of life's preciousness. The human connections forged during the crisis endured. Dr. Evans and the volunteers became regular visitors to Green Valley, no longer strangers but honored friends. They came not for emergencies, but for village celebrations and quiet cups of tea. The rescue mission had built bridges of friendship that were stronger than the concrete bridge the flood had destroyed. The village was no longer as isolated as it once was. It was now connected to a wider community of kind-hearted people, a network of support that gave them a greater sense of security and belonging. As the sun rose over the high peaks on a clear morning, a year after the Great Flood, it illuminated a village that was not just rebuilt, but reborn. The children played by the river, and the sheep grazed peacefully on the green hills. The memory of the storm was still there, a quiet reminder of the power of nature. But it was overshadowed by a much more powerful memory, the memory of courage.